EAP, sort of a fine line distinction. Chief Elkanik is the EAP administrator, and each building has one or more EAP directors. So in this building, as an example, there's three of us kind of that take the lead on that, Kathy Markovich and Pam and myself, primarily because we've got the upper floor of 1876 Pennell and then the lower floor, and then we've got sort of the clerk's area, so the three of us kind of divide and conquer. But that's the important thing to remember, is that the chief is the administrator, and he's sort of the in charge of the whole thing. But each building has a point person. The library, of course, is Josh, and so forth. And the objective of the EAP is to take security measures to protect people in town buildings and, of course, employees. So, let's see, plan director, great. As I pointed out, there can be more than one director for each building, depending on how it is planned out. The plan director has the authority to call, we'll get into it real quick here, a code red or a code blue. So next slide, if I could, Grant. Thank you. These are the emergency contacts. If you don't have these, we can send these out with an email to at least the department heads. Most of these are cell phones. These are direct. Obviously, if there's an emergency, you need to reach whoever you need to reach. So if you do not have those, these are the EAP directors for their respective buildings. And I have printed out the most current EAP plans that I will give to everyone in this list at the end if it needs updating. Obviously, it needs to be updated, and any updates or any changes at all, we need to make sure the chief is good with them, because the chief has to have a thorough understanding of what's happening for all of the aspects of the EAP. That's his responsibility, and out of respect for that, each of the directors need to make sure that he's aware of it. The alarms. There are different types of alarms depending on the building. There's direct voice talking, telephone intercom system, pull stations, and some of the town buildings have panic buttons that are basically silent alarms. Once those get triggered, there's no turning back. That means the sheriff is on his way, and he's not going to cancel the call. So if a town building has one of those, you're probably aware of that, but that's a very good way to send out a signal that you're in trouble. Obviously, it's not to be overused, but if you need it, it's there. And that's why it's there. So two types of safe zones, exterior and interior, and depending on the type of emergency, that determines if you use an exterior or interior. One of the interior safe zones for this building is actually that closet, if you will, right back there. And right on the inside, there's a real beefy barrel bolt that Ed put in. Thank you. And there are safe zones in most of the buildings, I believe. Interior. And the criteria for those is that it's supposed to be a room that's as safe as possible, and hopefully a room that doesn't have a glass door. I think we adjusted the library. Didn't we adjust that in the sorting room?
No, we have the staff bathroom.
Okay, so that's what you use for that. Okay. So every building obviously has its own, and that would be specified in the EAP plan for the respective building. Let's see. So Pennell, just as an example, as I touched upon, has 4 safe zones. It's got that door I just talked about. What may be someday, but is still currently a storage room in community development. The vault, which has a phone in it as well, and adjacent to the clerk's area. And that's got that's not fireproof. It's got I think it's a 4-hour wall. It's got a whole bunch of layers of sheetrock and so forth. It's a big, thick wall. So, and the recreation office. So, Outside safe zones. There are 2 for Pennell out by the flagpole out here in the parking lot, and the main sign out front. Each building has its own outside safe zone. They're listed out here. And obviously what's important is the employees in the respective building know where both of these interior and exterior safe zones are, and that should be reinforced obviously with the periodic drills that occur for implementing the EAP plan. So there are 2 types of basically it's been structured in a manner to try to keep it simple. Basically 2 types of emergencies. There's a code red and a code blue. Code red means get out. That means that there is a fire or there's some hazard in the building that has caused the EAP director to say, okay, there's a code red, everybody get out of the building. And that could be communicated multiple ways. It could be one of the EAP directors coming into the room and saying, we need to get out of the building, there's a fire. It could be something that comes over the phone. It could be any of those. Code blue is a lockdown. That means that it's safer to stay in the building in one of the interior safe rooms. A shooter, as an example, if they're in the building and it's a greater risk to go outside, the determination will be made either by the EAP director or the administrator as to whether or not it's safer to stay inside the building or get out. And whatever that decision is, obviously, those in the building need to be following the direction that's provided. So that's the code blue. And these are some of the slides that the chief had. Jump right in, Chief, if I'm misstating anything here. An active emergency type. Could you go back one, Grant, please? Just the active shooter, maybe? It's not in there. I thought that was in, uh-oh. Threats. Uh-oh, we got the wrong.
Should be in a following slide.
Yeah, no, I don't think he got the edits. Didn't get the edits. Okay. Well, so there's the slide that the chief added. If there's an active shooter, there are 3 basic options. There's running, evacuating, getting out, code red, hide in one of the interior safe zones, and if it's appropriate, and I think the chief may touch on when it is appropriate to do this, to fight. And if you are going to fight, as the expression goes, don't fight fair. You're fighting for your life and other people's lives. So.
The way that works, it's your personal safety that's most important. So if you can get out, you can run, get away from the threat, that's your job. If you can't, say the threat is too close, the threat's going to see you, get into your safe place, or as safe place as you can find, and barricade the door. Make it so no one can get in. If they do get in, it's no holds barred, do what you can. Anything you can put your hands around as a weapon, use it. Okay? We've been told by the kids at the schools, the high schools in particular, this is a national type thing. Everybody's focusing on these three things: run, hide, or fight. And we're told that if we respond to the high school and they don't recognize who's coming in the room, be prepared to get pummeled because they're all on board.
So those are the 3: run,
Yeah.
run, hide, or fight.
Right.
So emergency types, yep. So there's several different types of emergencies. There can be a medical incident, in which case you obviously dial 911, stay with the patient, and send someone to the door or ideally outside where the rescue unit's going to come, because they get here, okay, what's going on? They need to know where to go as soon as possible so they can get to the patient as soon as they can. Fire, dial 911, pull a fire station, they're clearly marked, and get on the, if in a building that has it, get on the PA in Pennell, what is it, 981? There's a code where all call, what is the all call? Page. Okay, and that will be a voice on all phones in the whole building, so. If you have time, but most important to call 911 and pull the fire alarm, because that,
Yeah, these pull stations are purposely located at exits. So on your way out the door, you know, the first most important person is yourself, right? You can't save yourself, you can't save anybody else. So as you're going out the door, hit that pull station as you're going out the door. That way everybody's alert.
threats, the next slide, I think. Many types of threats need to be aware of and communicate what the threat is to the appropriate person, ideally the plan director, or if necessary, the plan administrator, but the primary purpose is as soon as you're aware of a threat to make sure that other people know so that positive steps can be taken to address it. It may be a code red, it may be a code blue, it depends on what the nature of the threat is. If it is, I didn't touch on that with the code blue in an interior safe zone, you need to stay there until you're directed to come out by either law enforcement or the EAP director or administrator. That's your safe area. Obviously, you want to make sure it's the right person. You don't want to be opening up that door. That's your defense. Let's see, the next slide is severe weather. Hopefully, we have as much warning as possible. We don't get too many tornadoes here.
But it is happening in Maine now.
It is happening more, yep. And usually there's a little bit of warning. A lot of times, and I think the chief's going to talk about that at the very end. But does vigilance cover tornadoes, or is that other?
Vigilance is strictly in-house.
In-house, okay, so that wouldn't cover tornadoes, okay. But there are weather alerts in this day and age of smartphones that often come on across. Hallways and closets are typically safer. Ideally, if you can find a hallway or a closet that's close to a means of egress. You don't want to box yourself in, so. So let's see, hazardous material. That's typically a code red. Obviously, you want to dial 911 and tell the person that you call at 911 what you know about it. The more details, the better, obviously, because that's going to help the emergency personnel to respond better to it. If you, in the middle there, it says, what is the substance? Any information that you can provide. If you're not sure, you say, okay, I think it may be such and such, but I'm not sure. But any information that you can provide is going to help. Each building has a notebook for the SDS sheets, safety data sheets, as well as the EAP plan. In Pennell, that's in the clerk's area right by Rob's desk, I believe, on that bookshelf in the middle by the copier. So wherever, the library, I'm sure, has a location for that, and as long as everyone knows where that is, then life is good. So, let's see, off-hazard site, major chemical incidents may occur. If there is a hazardous release of a dangerous chemical, obviously you want to remain inside. It's not in the slide here, but ideally what would happen is one or more people in the respective building would know where the main control is for the air handlers, because a room like this has an air exchange rate. So if you've got an air handler and you've got a hazard chemical outside, you want to be shutting down that air handler so you're not pulling that cold air in. And I know Tom and I and Kathy know where it is in this building. Each Public Works, I'm sure you guys know where your air handler intake is. And Josh, we could work with you and get a couple people queued up for that so that you know what's there. If you don't have a major air handling system like public safety currently, it's not as much of an issue, but if you've got a constant air exchange and you've got some bad air outside, you want to shut those air handlers down to prevent that from coming in the building. Propane gas. That should be on there. Same thing, basically. Let's not be introducing propane gas into a building through the air handlers. But if there is a leak or an accident on the turnpike where a tractor-trailer truck overturns or something, presumably there'll be a phone call. We'll find out about that, and that's probably going to be a code blue to stay in the building. Out-of-control person, we touched on that a little bit earlier. The primary goal, of course, is to get the person under control and ensure that there are no weapons. As we talked about, if you're in one of the town buildings that has the alarm, that's a perfect use for that alarm to at least get someone that's trained in law enforcement on their way. We've talked about this other years. I believe that the question came up with using your personal cell phone, and if you can get yourself, if you've got an active shooter or some dangerous situation going on in the building, if you can get your cell phone to be outgoing only without a voice coming from the other end and get that on there, even if you're not with your phone, that microphone, if you will, in the building can be helping law enforcement to figure out what's going on. So if you're in, let's say you've got an active shooter that comes in and they're in the clerk's area, if we get a cell phone going with a mic used as a microphone and establish that line before they come up into community development, that can be a big aid for law enforcement because they kind of have ears inside the building if you can shut off the speaker part of your cell phone. I assume that's still a valid principle in a situation like that. So.
Maybe after assessor anyway.
That's right. He's the one with the bullseye. So
They hit the assessor more than they hit the code guy.
I don't.
The assessor closer to the entrance.
I don't think the code officer's too far behind, though. So anyway, I remember that's come up before, and that was the response. Terrorizing threat. The next slide, if I could, Grant. Weapons, obviously, that's typically going to be a code blue. It may be a code red, but I think the default would, that's weapons outside. Weapons outside would be a code blue, stay in the building, go to your interior safe zones. Weapons outside, let's see. Weapons inside, again, would be a code blue with a panic button, and like we talked about a couple minutes ago, with a cell phone used as a microphone. Active assault. That did make it. Good. We've touched on these. Active assault with a weapon. Inside is a code red. Get out. Personal safety first. And outside would be a code blue. Lockdown inside. Something like that. We probably want, obviously, lock the front doors. Anything we can do as employees, to secure the building, to try to isolate the threat from outside. And we talk on training. Great, thanks, Grant. Plan administrator. Whenever we talked about at the beginning, make sure your plan is up to date for the respective building. Whenever it's changed, make sure that the chief knows. And there's a couple little, let's see, where are you listening? So code red, what does a code red mean? Get out, that's right.
Fire or a gas event.
Yep, evacuate the building, yep. If I had a chocolate bar, I'd give you one, but So here you can, there you go. There you go, sir. So, let's see. After you evacuate, where do you go on a code red? Flagpole, yep, outside safe zone. There you go, sir.
All right, I want to.
Let's see. All inside assaults require a code red. True or false?
False.
False. That's right. Exactly right. If a person passes out on the floor, you should look for a sheriff, call 3931, or call 911. 911, you guys are pros. Okay. If you encounter an out-of-control person in the workplace, you should A, tell them to leave the building, keep a safe distance between you and them, or argue with them. Argue. The answer, of course, is B. Keep a safe distance and try not to inflame the situation. So, sure.
What if you have two civilians get into a fight on site? Well, I mean, obviously you call 911, but if it extends to the point of like someone is getting a brutal beating and is defenseless, should you try and stop them? Or just wait for the sheriff to arrive?
Personal choice, and if you have it, the silent alarm, probably.
Yeah, you call a 911, obviously they're going to try to keep, there's something in progress like that, they're going to keep you on the phone.
Okay.
And you're going to continually update that. I'll go, if you have time, I'll go over what happens when you call 911, but personal choices to getting involved, probably going to tell you not to get involved on the phone, but it's hard to watch someone get the crap.
Right.
But
Okay. So the question was for, because people are going to be watching this throughout the year for training, the question was if there's a fight in the building, let's say it's two residences or between an employee and a resident, what do? You call 911 and or use the silent alarm, and the chief responded that 911 will keep you on the line so that they can actively have a handle on what's happening with the situation. So, and that is it for the EAP. There is, do you want to talk real quick about vigilance? It's not quite online yet, but when we do get it online, I thought it would help.
how much time do I have?
You have
5 minutes?
5 minutes. So.
The town is still in the process of rolling out the vigilance program. We need IT support, which we don't really have right now, to connect all the buildings. It's an internal system. Everybody with a workstation will have several icons on their workstation, one being fire, one being police, one being basically like an intercom system. So say Deb said, okay, if I can take the afternoon off, she can click on that intercom system, type out, everybody goes home at noontime today, Merry Christmas, and then that's one way to disseminate information. If you click on the police one, the cops are going to come. It's basically considered a silent alarm. And I'll touch back on that either. All these icons are 2 steps, so you have to click on it and then confirm. Click on it. If you have time to type in information, you can. You click on the police one. It's going to notify everybody on your campus that, hey, I've got a serious problem here. There's a guy in the clerk's office being confrontational, and then click on send. This is all, everybody's on computers these days, so it's all very clandestine. No one's going to really know what you're doing. Judy can be at her desk while watching Elizabeth deal with somebody. Click, we need somebody else over here, and send. It's a great system. It hasn't been totally rolled out yet. For some reason, the library is not connected to the town office, and we need to make that happen. Real quick, when you call 911, you're going to feel, if anybody hasn't called 911 here, it's quite the experience. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. So bear with them, go through the questions and the answers as quick as you can. They're following a checklist. They have to ask these questions. What's the nature problem? How old is the person? What's your phone number? What's your address? Can you confirm your address? These are all very important questions. Josh mentioned a fight. A fight is a type of call that's in progress. They're going to, or at least they should, keep you on the phone as long as possible. If it's a call that Josh came into work and someone broke a window out, that's not in progress. They're gonna take your name, phone number, briefly what happened, and then when they're free, they'll have a cop come over and take the report. But an in-progress call, an assault call, that's in progress. They're gonna ask you as much information many questions as they can, to get as much information as they can to pass on to the officer. If they ask you to describe the individual, try to start top down, because that's how we look at people. We look at their face first. He's bald, or he's wearing a baseball hat, he's wearing a white shirt, black pants. Try to start from the top down, if you can think of it. Weapons. He's got a gun. Okay, what kind of gun? Well, what do you mean? Is it a handgun? Is it a bazooka? What exactly are we dealing with? Or he's got a knife. Is it a jackknife, or is it a samurai sword? These are all important questions to be prepared to answer. I briefly touched on vigilance. It's a great system. We just need a little help in-house to get it rolled out, and we can do some training on that when it is rolled out. Any questions on the public safety realm? Thank you. Next.
Last thing, it was in the slides for the EAP. It's supposed to work, if you will, not just during normal business hours, but off business hours. Either Kathy or I are typically here for like council meetings and so forth, but the library in particular, if you happen to have a group, a homeowners group or something that meets quite regularly, and you have a typical contact person that gets the key, what have you, it would be good if they had a rudimentary understanding of the EAPs, because you may not be there when something happens. So that's...
As your public safety director, this is my work phone. It is always on 24/7. As the administrator, you can call me anytime, hey, what do I do? Or really, if you have to call me, you probably should be calling 911, but just know that my phone is always on. If I'm out of the country, then someone else will take your call. And there's one other thing I was going to say after that. We talked about active shooters earlier. One of my goals in the next 5 years or so is to increase the security of our buildings. I want you all to know that. I've been to a number of active shooter trainings and drills, and depending on the structure we're talking about, some of those get solved like this by the cops, and the ones that get solved like this by the cops are the ones that have video surveillance. We did one at the main mall. One cop went directly to the security office, was on video, and he told everybody exactly where to go. So quickly, to the point that the drill administrator said, well, hold on, time out. It was too easy. This has to be harder than that. But it's really not, it doesn't have to be. So building security is something I'll be working on in the future. Thank you.